You are listening to What's Next? Conversations with Boomers, and I'm Barb Desmarais, your host. Okay, today is a treat. Definitely. We have Tim on again. But we have Tim and Barb. So, I'm going to let them tell their story, but if any regular listener knows that Tim is actually divorced, but reconnected with his wife. So I'm going to get them to tell the story because it's a really fun story. And because we're living, the world has gone completely haywire and crazy. And if you're anything like me, you lose sleep, you're losing sleep over it and having anxiety. This is a happy story. So welcome back, Tim.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And Barb, so nice to have you here. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, my pleasure.
And it's so nice to meet you. Yeah, yes, we've heard each other's names. We've already had the Barb discussion before recording here. So the Barb conversation. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to, and whoever wants to answer, I want to go right back to, how did you meet?
Ladies first.
Ladies first, okay.
We have a very unusual meeting story. We were both in Los Angeles at the time pursuing acting careers. For me, it had always been a childhood dream, despite getting very, very, very educated in terms of official education. My dream was to move to LA and get involved in the acting thing because theater was my passion as a kid. And Tim had been a professional actor straight through and was already a professional working actor. Now, this is such a many chapters ago compared to where we are now. But we were both down to a final screen test for a lead role on a sitcom on NBC. And we met in the waiting room of that screen test. So we were all called together. The last 3 to 5 actors for each of the different roles were all called to come. And it's funny because you could see 3 to 5 people dressed just like you in your same age range. And you knew those were the other people competing for your role. And then you saw 5 other people who looked like Tim and 5 other people who looked like each of the different characters. It was very awkward and strange.
Sure.
Because one at a time they were bringing you in and you were sitting right next to the people you were, competing with, and all the bigwigs were behind the door in the room, the head of
yikes.
And head of casting and head of, primetime comedy. And Tim and I happened to sit next to each other in that waiting room. And so we immediately began kind of assuaging one another's nerves. We began chatting. We began asking, what do you think is going to happen in there? He gave me some guidance about whether I should wear the coat or not the coat that I was wearing. I mean, we were just trying to calm down our nerves. And then we both did our screen tests and our final auditions. And then we both actually got the roles. So
she was adorable, by the way, just so you know.
I believe it.
So we were both cast in a sitcom on NBC in 1990. So we met starring on that television show together, which didn't last very long. The show itself was on Saturday nights after the Golden Girls on NBC. It brought us together. We met and fell in love doing that show, that sitcom together. But the show itself did not last for more than that one season. So
that's a cool story.
Right?
And jump forward 35 years. Here we are.
There you are. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Barb, what were the qualities that Tim had that made you fall in love with him?
Well, he was extremely warm. One of the first things that you'll know about Tim if you spend any time with him is he's incredibly warm. He's incredibly present. He's like a blanket. You just feel safe with him. And he's so funny. And I'm just telling you, to find somebody that funny and that warm who just lit me up. I mean, he just lit me up. He constantly had me laughing. And again, he was a very safe person. He was very warm. He was very authentic. He had no bravado. He wasn't posing like some of the guys trying to be hotshots in my age range in my early 20s. And he was someone I felt I could confide in, really, really early, really quickly off the bat. So those were the things that kind of hooked me in.
So Barb, you said if you ever spend any time with them, I'll tell you a secret. I have spent a lot of time with them.
Yes.
I've spent how many? It's got to be 2+ years now, Tim.
Yes.
So I've experienced all those things too. Although we've never, as you know, we've never met in the flesh, but you know, I know what you're talking about. Okay, so Tim, what were the qualities that Barb had that made you fall in love with her?
Well, first of all, I have to say, I don't know that I've ever been described as a blanket before, except maybe a wet one.
No.
Well,
However,
you want to be somebody's warm blanket.
and I did give up all my posing before I met you, Barb. So that's why I wasn't posing. I just got that out of my system.
Yep.
Oh, wow. There were so many things. And I'll tell you, it was from the moment I met her. It was just like, I got the lightning bolt, as they say in Italy in particular. They say, you're struck with the lightning.
Yeah.
The minute I looked at her, and I may have told you this before, I thought, oh, there you are.
Oh, you're my person. You're the one.
Yeah, like I've been looking for you. I've been waiting for you. Now, of course, I know that Barb describes it as, you seem like a very nice man. But me, I was smitten. I was really smitten. And the first things I noticed was she was so vivacious, so outgoing. I was sitting there minding my own business, and she said, "Hi, I'm Barb. What's your name?" And I'm like, wow, hello. And then she was so easy to talk to. And talk about warm and engaging and charming and funny, and really, really smart. I mean, like brainiac smart kind of thing. And I'm what they call a sapiosexual. I have brain envy. Basically, that's what they call it when you fall in love with how smart someone is. You're attracted to that. It makes you.
It is pretty appealing.
Yeah. So, so we would have amazing long conversations. We still do to this day. She's also really adventurous. I was a little more, I don't know, cautious, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
She'd be the type that if, we were at a hotel and we'd go down to swim and its sign says closed at 10 p.m. and she would go, let's climb over the fence. Come on. And I would be the one saying, no.
A rule breaker.
We can't do that. And she's like, what, are the pool police going to come? What's the worst that could happen? They say, get out of the pool. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty bad, actually.
Can't do that. Can't go through that.
Right. While she was saying that, of course, she was climbing over the fence and I was standing there going, oh, well, okay, I guess I'm doing this. And it was something that, I really absolutely appreciated deep down, that she lured me out of the comfort zone. Sometimes I say, in some ways, when I met you, I needed a sail on my boat and you needed a bit of an anchor.
What a good analogy. I love that.
It's a good combo. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how long were you together before you got married?
Well, we got married 9 years in.
So 5 years in, we got married.
You're saying 9, Barb? Saying 5?
Oh, I'm thinking about how long before we had kids. I think.
Yeah. That's just so 5 years in, we got married.
5 years in, we got married, and then we waited longer to have kids. Yeah.
Well, 5 years. That's a long courtship.
Okay, that was me again, just saying. In fact, when it had gotten to the point where it was ridiculous, literally Barb turned to me and said, what would you think if I proposed to you?
Uh-huh. And what did you say?
I don't remember saying that, Barb, but you did. And of course, what I said was, oh, well, no, don't do that because you jumped the gun. I had something planned.
And I know it's only been 5 years.
Yeah.
We don't want to rush into this.
Can't believe how fast you can buy a ring.
Barb, I met my husband and we were married 9 months later.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, he proposed to me 3 weeks after we met. Yeah, and that is a true story. Anyway, okay. So the marriage, sadly, ultimately ended in divorce. Although Tim really has shared with us so many times how throughout your period of divorce, you've always remained friends. You do Christmas together. You share the kids' birthdays. You share holidays. You share all sorts of things. How did you make that work so effectively?
Well, the thing is, we actually share quite a bit more than that. We have chosen to remain a family of 4, even though we needed to divorce. Now, the reason we needed to divorce, well, there are several reasons, but they were valid. In other words, we'd been together, 25 years or so by that point. And we'd gotten together pretty young, and we had a lot of individual things to work on and to face and to deal with. And we had been in a dynamic that was just a little too enmeshed. We were looking for one another to meet our own needs too much. And we were dealing with the stressors of 2 high needs children who had some disabilities. And it was a time where things just got to the point where we realized we were kind of stepping on each other's toes too often, hurting each other's feelings too often, arguing too often. And yet we knew we loved each other very much. So we decided, well, let's remain a family and let's just reinvent what this might look like. So why don't we find another place for you to live, Tim, and let's just kind of explain it to the kids like, mom and dad are going to take a little bit of a timeout. Like when you go to timeout, when you're emotionally overwhelmed and you're flooded and dysregulated, those are adult words. We would use younger words with the kids. But we made the analogy that sometimes you need a little separation from somebody you love to kind of regroup and to get your emotions in check and to be able to breathe and make, good choices. And that's kind of how we explained it to them. And so we went together to look for an apartment for Tim. We found a house, a beautiful house for him. I was a part of that entire thing. We brought the kids over there and said, "Do you want to see the new house Dad's going to live in down the street?" We made it a very exciting, little project, and they kept running around. Which room's going to be my room? And we tried to really normalize it so that even through the process, he'd come over to my house for dinner. I'd go over to his house for dinner. We'd go miniature golfing on Sunday. We'd go to a movie on Saturday. We just were doing a lot of things together as a family, even though he would go sleep at that house and I would go sleep at this house. And even though the kids spent time at both of the houses, there was also a fluidity to it. So if he had to travel, they'd be with me. If I had to travel, they'd be with him. So they didn't face a lot of acrimony. The kids didn't face any kind of fighting. They didn't face any kind of, well, it's not my turn, it's your turn. They felt like we're a family, but we live in 2 houses kind of, which was intentional on our part.
Did they ever question that? Like, why isn't Dad living here? And why, like, we're all happy together here. Why aren't we under the same roof? Did they ever challenge that?
Well, when we told them that we were separating, they were not surprised and astonished because when we were under the same roof, we weren't getting along very well. As much as we tried to not, show it, kids are like little radar dishes and sponges. And so they weren't like, oh, wow, you guys are so happy. And they were sort of like, yeah, They were sad. They cried, but they weren't devastated. And in fact, after a time that we were, living apart, they said at times it's like, this works a lot better, This actually, you guys are doing a lot better, it seems, than.
So it was more peaceful.
Yeah.
To kids that are whose parents have divorced, it can be extremely traumatic and horrible, and certainly when the parents don't want to be in the same room together and there's just this constant tension. What you're describing would be many kids' absolute dream. If only my parents could get along. I wish we could do Christmas together still. I wish we could do all these things. It's rare that it can happen like this?
Well, we made an agreement early on that we were going to do everything we could to make sure it wasn't ugly, that it wasn't scorched earth, and it's first and foremost for the kids, and then for each other, really, because there wasn't this deep-seated hatred or animosity at all. There was just like this. We're both hurting each other a lot, and we don't want to do that anymore. And we both realized, and Barb realized it first, that we had work to do on ourselves that somehow we were failing at doing within the construct of the marriage we had created. Now, I will also add that we weren't, playing house or like saying, let's, kind of pretend to be married but not live together. I mean, we got divorced. It was official on paper. Everything separated. Again, we used a mediator, not lawyers. We were very fair with each other. Again, because we're friends and we have deep love for each other. But during the time we were divorced, we dated other people somewhat and did, had our own lives. Astoundingly, we actually even went on vacation together as a family.
It was just fabulous.
Yeah, and then people would look at us and say, "You sure you're divorced? I mean, come on, what's really going on here?"
Yeah.
Well, it was really important to us for the kids, I think. I mean, we were also very good friends with each other, but we just really wanted those kids to not go on a vacation with just one of the parents. It just felt odd to do that, So
I just commend both of you and for doing what you did, and just the insights that you had and still have. We needed time to grow ourselves. This is you're wonderful role models to people that are in a similar position. Truly, this is sort of the absolute ideal picture that very few people can accomplish. And it so often just goes back to being self-aware, knowing how to communicate effectively.
I would say that a lot of people, when they're separating and divorcing, are so deep in the hurt of all of it. And I have nothing but empathy for that. And there was quite a bit of hurt, but we really chose to remember, like, we picked each other. Like, we're not victims here. We picked each other. We have deep love for each other, even though things have gotten to a point where they're not working right now, right? But, what if during this process, my biggest goal could be that Tim is treated well and respectfully and fairly? What if his biggest goal could be that I was treated lovingly and respectfully and fairly? And we stated that outright, that it might not always be easy, but that was going to be our intention, So if that's helpful for anybody listening.
And it wasn't just words. You lived by that.
I think stating it in words as an intention did help. And then, yes, we tried to live inside of that intention. So.
And just to be realistic for the listeners, we had our disagreements. We had our times when, we were at odds with each other. But again, we really didn't let it go ugly. And interestingly enough, we both had somewhere to retreat to, so to speak, our own space, and if you can create that inside of a marriage, that you have some space to yourself where you can cool down, cool off, rethink, whatever, that can be very healthy.
Yeah. Well, Tim, you and I have talked about different kinds of arrangements for people, one of them being the living apart together. Two people truly love each other, they're committed to each other, but they're better off living apart.
Right. In fact, getting two humans just to cohabitate at all under any, roommates, anything, any circumstance is a challenge, And then you take someone like me and Barb. We're both very strong-willed and opinionated, and we're not shrinking violets, that's for sure. Would you say, Barb?
Right. That's true. I would agree.
Yeah. Well, you seem like a really good match in many ways, but the best of matches have disagreements because we're humans and we can't always be thinking the same thing at the same time, and we've all got our own temperament and all those things. And yeah. Okay. So how many years were you divorced before when you rediscovered each other again? I mean, when I say rediscovered, you seem to have made the decision we're going to try again.
I'd love to hear your version of this.
Oh. Well, let's see. We have been divorced about 8 years. So, I mean, I would really say it's only in the last couple of years out of 8 that we started talking about, um, you know, is there benefit in considering recoupling? We love each other a lot. We spend a lot of time together. We enjoy each other so much. We are really doing well in the 2 different houses we live in as far as the way that we relate. And like Tim said, having somewhere to retreat to when things are difficult and having our own space has been really helpful. So cohabitating is definitely a question that we're not sure about, to be honest.
Mm-hmm,
I'd say the past couple of years, we started kind of talking about the process of possibly recoupling. So there was a little bit of like a meta conversation, like rather than just the conversation, like, well, is this something we should consider? Should we have a conversation about recoupling? What would it mean? What are the things from before that we would want to be different? How would we want to show up differently? How would we both want to be seen, witnessed, and validated differently? What broke down before, and how would we attend to those things now? So I think it started opening a conversation, like a very mindful conversation about what would be different, how would it be different, why would it be different, what tools do we have today that we didn't have then, are we genuinely a fit on the values and priorities that matter the most, and we're in that exploration now. He still does live in the other house down the street. We're in the exploration of what would it look like to recouple. Would we ever cohabitate? Would we ever combine everything, or would we be partners again, with certain things staying a little bit separated for the sake that it worked better for us? So those are some of the conversations we're having now. Would you say that time feels about right to you, Tim?
Yeah, that's about right. And I think that it started, for me, it was gradual. It was very slow. How when you realize how you end up talking one way or the other, 3 or 4 times a day minimum, on the phone, over text, in person, 7 days a week, and you realize, I really enjoy this person's company. I do, and I like hearing their ideas, and I like hearing their voice, and I like collaborating with them, and I like doing activities together. And it's not just, it wasn't like I'm calling about the children. That's, it starts at first. It's just like the logistics of co-parenting.
The practical.
The practical stuff.
Yeah.
But, 6, 7 years in, and you realize you're still, and the kids are growing up and don't need as much tending, and it's to a certain extent. And then you're still like, good morning. How are you? What you doing? How you feeling? Every day.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice. I mean, you're truly best friends as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've been on the same page in so many ways in our lives together. Our lives, it's like plural, in our values and in the things that we enjoy and believe in. So that makes it much easier. There were no big, huge deal breakers like, that I believe. There were some rough spots that, even to this day, we're still working through some things, like how do you partner? Maybe that's a lifelong.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah. I mean, if you're that kind of person that likes to reflect and assess and check in with each other, there's always things.
And I just think that sometimes the first thing that you forget when a marriage starts to, go south, is that you got together really because you liked being with the other person. There were other things. You might find them attractive. You might find them all sorts, entertaining. You might think whatever. You might like their upbringing or their education. But ultimately, it's just when I'm with them, I feel good. And when
It's as simple as that, isn't it? And we've talked about that before. Sort of, what are the indicators that this is the right person for you? Is you just feel good about it. You can be yourself. You feel comfortable.
And then life comes in, and with all these challenges, like children and jobs, and also financial issues, and you become less fun to be with. Both of you can do that. That can happen. You get weighed down by these worries and cares and upsets, and sometimes very, very, very real, struggles that are difficult. And how you face them together is a big deal. One of the things that I think we did in the last 5 years was face some difficulties with our kids that we faced together by supporting each other.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things will tear couples apart. Big things that are really painful. And I think we drew together. Would you say that, Barb? Yeah. We proved to each other that no matter what our status was as a couple, we had each other's back.
And that's so important. That is such a, there's many tests to a relationship, but one of them is how do you handle the challenges within the family as a team? I mean, as you said, lots of times it can divide you, other times it can unite you. And it's just so great when you adopt this stronghold opinion, belief, we're in this together. And it's better for everybody.
I was just talking to another coach this morning, and she asked me, so what did you learn what have you learned, Dorothy? What have you learned during this time apart? And I said, one of the things I learned is that if you have kids and you're going to be co-parents, it's almost like getting a do-over on your relationship. If you choose. If you choose to say, well, I'm not really fully proud of the way I showed up at the last part of our marriage, but now I'm kind of getting a second chance to show up as a partner, maybe not as a husband or a wife, but as a partner, co-parent. And can I do this better? Can I show up better, more generous, less self-centered, less volatile, less reactive, more loving, whatever, for the sake of raising kids together? And I think that's a golden opportunity that a lot of people don't recognize that that's what they're getting, actually.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Barb, do you feel that you're a different person in some ways now than you were as a married person when you were, both under the same roof? You've had all these years.
Yeah. In many ways, I'm a different person. In some ways, I still am the same and having kind of some of the core innate qualities that are innately me. But, I'm a much older and wiser person because, when you do separate from someone mindfully, then you have to look at the causes of your own anxiety or depression or upset or difficulty. And it's a lot harder to make it that it's the other person, that it's the other person under your roof who's making things difficult for you. If only he was X, Y, or Z, I wouldn't have stress, or I wouldn't have anxiety, or I wouldn't be so overburdened, or, you remove that person and then you start looking at, wow, I still have stressors in these ways. I still find myself waking up down in certain ways. I still feel overwhelmed by X, Y, or Z. Maybe I need to start applying new paradigms and new concepts and new tools to kind of clean up my own personal growth, my own self-mastery, and really own a lot of the pieces of my own life that I kind of thought the other person was influencing, perhaps more so than they were. And if I can use these tools, then I can actually have anybody in my world and not be allowing myself to fall off my grounded, centered place, because I'm employing tools to overcome things like fear or anxiety or overwhelm or burnout. When you have two high needs kids, it's very exhausting. When you're both entrepreneurs, financially, it's very exhausting because no one has a secure income and things go up and down. Like, there were a lot of things that I still work on, trying to stay in today, trying to stay in trust, not jumping to future tripping or negative future fantasy about a lot of the things that are always going to be somewhat in the arena of unknowns. And I think that's an area that has changed a lot, whereas earlier on, I think we wanted things to feel more secure in certain ways that I think are impossible to feel secure as a human being on a planet like this, where there's so much change you have no authority over, and it's about kind of rolling with it. So a lot of things have changed since we parted, which is why I still say it was so necessary. It's why I still say, it's not like, oh, we just should have stayed together this whole time, especially if we're coming back together. Should we not have separated? Well, we really had to. We absolutely had to be faced with the awarenesses and the insights and the paths that we found ourselves faced with in order to become the people who may be successful at repartnering. So.
Well, I just love what you just said, because you can only properly reflect on any situation by creating space for that, is by distancing yourself from it. And also what you were saying, it's so when there's problems, challenges in a relationship, it's just the default for most of us. It's because he is doing this or she is doing that. And it's only when we start looking at ourselves, it's what was my part in that? Because everything is, takes two. And when you start recognizing your own role in any of those challenges, there's so much growth there. There's so much, and you realize how much power you have by changing your response to things, changing your perspective, changing your attitude. And that's the only person we have control over, right?
You might wonder why Barb is able to have so much to say about this. I don't know if we said that we're both actually coaches. She's been.
I know you are. I know.
Much longer than I have. And so what do you do exactly, Barb?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I do have an executive coaching practice of 25 years. And
25 years.
Yeah, 25 years now. Yep. And I coach high achieving, ambitious, successful women. And a lot of them are in corporate, and a handful of them are business owners, and they are, type A, high achieving, wonderful people who are dealing with stress and overwhelm and burnout and fatigue and wanting to be more effective leaders and wanting to, continue to climb the career ladder and continue to create the security that they're looking for, but not in a way where they're dealing with so much exhaustion, stress, not being present, self-care, being thrown out the window, and want to increase their visibility and their influence and their confidence in their professional and personal lives. So, I have an executive coaching practice, and I speak and I write in those subjects. So, thank you for asking me, Tim. What do I do?
Yes, I thought I'd just throw you the entree there.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Well, I was also a coach for many years at work, and also did a lot of public speaking. I was a parenting coach, parenting and relationship. Anyway, Tim, have you? How have you changed? And have you shown up as a different Tim than who you were?
I'm almost completely unrecognizable now.
Yeah.
Would agree. By the way, speaking of older and wiser, you said, Barb, I think if we ever did a vaudeville team that we could be older and wiser, and I'm 8 years older than you, so you get to be
definitely older and wiser. Yeah,
you get to be wiser. Well, I came from a background in which I did not really learn a good amount of emotional regulation. Let's put it that way. I was very passionate. I was very opinionated, and I was also very hot-headed. So it was easy for me to, I used to joke, I really only have two emotions. Both of them are anger. I wasn't always an angry young man, but I could go there pretty easily. And so that was one of the first big changes I made, was to recognize that I didn't have much mass intelligence, or what it was, what's it called?
Emotional intelligence.
That's it. I was going to say artificial intelligence. I have none of that either. But yes, emotional intelligence. I didn't have a whole lot of emotional intelligence or mastery or understanding of how you can be responsive and not just reactive. And so that was a big change, was for me to learn how to regulate and take 3 deep breaths and shut my mouth and think and then respond. I also really went headlong into what does it mean to be a great man? What does it mean to be a great father? What does it mean to be a great partner? So I really jumped in with learning, studying, getting coaching, getting help, and then becoming a coach myself as well. And in the process of being a coach for the last 7 years, everything that my clients needed to help with, it seemed to always show up in my life as well. So it always gave me the opportunity to go, oh, okay, I got to work on that one too, sort of thing. So I committed myself to being a better man. Literally during the divorce, I said to my best friend, no matter what happens, no matter how this turns out, I am going to come out a better man. That was
And you have, obviously.
I believe I have, actually. I am proud of the work that I've done and continue to do. It's an ongoing process, right?
Well, I just love how you've both taken ownership of your own stuff. And I know what you say, when you're coaching somebody, you learn a lot about yourself. I remember many sessions with people thinking, I think I need to hear that myself, what I just said to her.
Who was I talking to? Oh,
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, you do. I mean, it is a profession where there's a lot of growth for the practitioner also.
Physician, heal thyself.
Yeah. Well, I think, Barb, your clients are very, very fortunate to have you. And I know, and I would say the same to you, Tim. We've gotten to know you and your wisdom and your insights and humor and all those things. So, they're your clients, both your clients are getting very good value, I would say.
I think of one other thing to add in that might be valuable for this conversation, if that's okay, which is that Tim and I have done things very differently than social norms in a lot of different ways. And if anyone's listening, I just want to point to that, like, we have all these group agreements of how relationships are supposed to look. And, we just decided we're going to do something a little bit different. And it was so surprising to people, but people said, I wish I'd thought of that. It sounds like such a good paradigm you guys are doing. And, early on in our relationship, way before children, very, very early on in our relationship, we also realized that we were having trouble cohabitating, and we really loved each other, but we were really struggling with cohabitating, and we moved into separate places and stayed together as a couple, but for a couple of years realized we needed a little more space and a little more time to have our own apartments. And even then people were assuming we were breaking up, and I heard Barb moved out, and Tim would say, we're together, we're head over heels together, but we just decided 2 apartments is really a better fit for us now based on some of our styles and some of our stuff. And people just couldn't get their head around that we weren't breaking up, that we were just changing our habitation, structure. And so that's just an example of also coming back later and saying, let's be divorced, but let's consider ourselves still a family of 4, even though the paradigm of marriage is not the paradigm that Tim and I are in, but we are in the paradigm of best friends and co-parents. And there's nothing that says we can't invent or define how we want to do it. And even though people are sometimes like, wait, what? I just want to give anybody permission, like, you can invent anything you want, I just felt that was...
Yeah, there's no rules around this. There's norms. There's sort of cultural norms, but there are no rules. And there's all sorts of different configurations now. And I just think, whatever works for you. If you're both on the same page and this works, great.
I guess we practiced in advance, didn't we?
Because we lived separately for quite a while, before a few years at least, before deciding to cohabitate again. And that was really necessary at the time too. We were very much in love, but we were not good in a certain amount of roommating types of things, So
yeah, it's hard. It is hard. So, I mean, the last question, you've more or less answered it. What does the future look like? But it sounds like that you're still in conversation about that. And it's not a reflection of your lack of care and love for each other at all. It's just what's best for the two of you, and kind of taking it day by day. Can you say anything more about that?
Well, we're entering the empty nest paradigm, because our daughter moved out a few weeks ago to
did she?
her own apartment, and is enjoying it and doing pretty well. There's a lot for her to still learn, but so that's the first step. We still have our other child at home, but that I see that as the future expands in front of us, that we'll have some other decisions to make about, okay, now what are we going to make up? What are we going to create? And I'm actually very excited about that.
Yeah, things do change once the kids go, and that's a whole other story too. Is because you have a different kind of relationship with them, and you're still their parents, but they're adults. And
yeah, we still have the one at home. I think it's going to be a little while, but you're right that it is also bringing with it kind of a new chapter as well.
Yeah, and lots of times they come back.
Yeah,
there's the boomerang kids. Yep. Yeah, one of ours came back.
Okay, shut your mouth, as they say in the South.
Yeah, she came back twice, and yeah, anyway, she's been on her own for a long time now. But yeah,
in many cases, I understand it really makes sense, especially with the economy the way it is. Kids can
exactly
live with mom and dad and save a bunch of money. And right now, our child who did move out, every dollar she earns is going into rent, utilities, and food. I mean, there's no extra. So
that's what it's like now for kids. It's tough.
Yeah.
And then when we moved to Canada, I mean,
come on up. Yeah.
Tim's like, let's create a plan B, given what's going on in the United States. Let's think about where we would exile to, I suppose.
Oh gosh. I mean, I just keep reading on social media. We're coming to Vancouver. We're coming to Canada. Yeah. And we welcome you, of course.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, we'll wind down now, because I know, Barb, you've got an appointment coming up, and I really, Barb, thank you so much. It's just been a joy to meet you, and yeah, I mean, Tim's kind of part of the furniture here now.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know how he enjoys it. I know how he's had such fabulous talks with you. I think it's wonderful that he's, having so much fun with you, and that you invite him on so often. I think it's just terrific.
Well, we love having him on, and yeah, we do have a lot of fun. There's a lot of laughter, and yeah. Tim, as always, thank you. Merci beaucoup. I'll just throw out my Canadian.
Yes, absolutely. Chapeau du fromage.